Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, and welcome to another show of Women Today, live on TV1. I am your presenter for today, and my name is NACIMA Khan. Welcome to the show. Our subject of discussion today is parenting the whole child. So some of the questions we are going to discuss today is, first of all, what do we mean by the whole child? Is parenting just limited to mum and dad, or is it beyond mum and dad? Are there other people that we haven't factored or thought about? And have we overlooked parts of the child's life that haven't been fulfilled yet in how we parent them? And also, what are the missing pieces to make our child whole again? These are just some of the points we'll be discussing today, and as always, we would love to hear from you. So please do join in today. The number, I believe, is on the screen at the bottom, or it's going to come up very soon. So please do call that number, and we would love to hear your comments and your experiences as well in terms of this topic. So to delve into the subject of parenting the whole child, we will be looking at a particular book which I have right in front of me here. It's called Family Jigsaws, and this provides a unique perspective into this particular topic. It's looking at the role of grandparents and the part that they play in child development and child learning, and it would, looks into the part of how the child as a whole develops and what pieces are missing from that development. And we are honoured to have with us today the author of this book, Dr. MEHERA Ruby, in the studio, who is, of course, an author. She's also a personal development and parenting coach, and she's also involved in community organisations and projects. So I would like to greet my guest. Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Ruby.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
We are honoured to have you on the show.
It's always an honour to be here.
Thank you for coming on a wintry, cold wintry evening.
Yes, I'm a bit cold today, but alhamdulillah.
So thank you for coming. So I wanted to start off. So first of all, we want to basically talk about the topic of parenting the whole child. So what is meant by when we talk about parenting the whole child?
So I'm sure people have different explanations for what the whole child is and means. From my kind of research, from my study, from my observation, and really my take on it, is that the whole child, when we think about the whole child, I think about the child as a learner. And when we think about children as learners, they come with particular sets of identities. So we're not uniform in a identity. So, you know, where our ethnicity would make up a part of our who we are, our family roots will make us some, you know, who we are. Our sort of the spiritual roots, for us, Islam is a very big part, but within that is our spiritual roots is really important as well. But also our language, so our with ethnicity comes our culture, how we do things, and part of that culture includes our language. So when we think about the whole child, that's one way of looking at the whole child, but also looking at the whole child could be looking at from the different parts of our nature. So we have our physical, emotional, mental and spiritual side to us. And again, you know, they combine quite interestingly to those four other foundational aspects to our who we are, what makes us who we are. So I guess from my little understanding and my perspective, that's what kind of encapsulates what a whole child is. And so when we deal with a child, it's important to recognize each of those aspects. And often what you'll find, we both, I guess, are living in this country, in the UK, our own experiences, say, of schooling, of home, of the different spaces that we go to, any one of those parts could be missing. So either our spirit, you know, we leave certain parts of our identity at the gates. And so that space is only dealing with one or two parts of those jigsaw pieces, I guess, you know, of what makes us a whole person. So yeah, you know, in terms of looking at the whole self, whether it's a child or an adult, I guess what makes up our identity will encapsulate the whole, who we are as a whole.
My next question, I mean, you kind of answered it, is why is this important? So when it comes to a child, why is it important for us to think about the child as a whole with all the different components that you spoke about?
So the reason why it's important, I guess, it's, for me, I like to make it evidence-based. because I come from a background of research and academia, and also if you think about our faith, all of those aspects are actually recognized and encouraged in our faith as well. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about in the Quran that I've created nations and tribes so that you can get to know each other. Otherwise, we would have been I can't pronounce it, we would have been the same, right? Homogeneous group. But we're not. We are different nations, we are different tribes. That brings in language, culture, identity, ethnicity, and spirituality as well. So the reason why it's important, based on some of the research that we've done, and that might be another show for another book, is one of the research projects we were doing was at school, in a primary school, where we were looking at bilingual resources, children to be able to use bilingual resources.
Oh, so things like books.
Books and poetry. So, when teachers are setting work for the children in literacy and numeracy, enabling them to use their language in the classroom, which teachers don't often think about, because we have this perception that if you allow children to speak their language, they may use it to abuse the situation. But actually, when you allow them to do that in a wholesome way, they use it quite well. Because these are not facilitated, they will use it in the playground, which isn't a regulated space always, and they'll try and teach the swear words. And from our experience of how we learn language, and children will teach funny things, and how to take the mickey out of somebody else, criticize someone else. So they use that because they haven't been taught how to embrace their literal side or their language skills in that way.
Or to celebrate it.
So to celebrate it. So one of the children actually, at the end of the project, when we were interviewing the children, they said, this project just made me realize that I came into this school bilingual, and I'm potentially going to leave it monolingual.
Really?
And so for me, that was such a powerful statement from a year 4 or 5 child, that they realized that where we're supposed to celebrate multilingualism, we teach our children Chinese and French and Spanish, and we've created this idea in them that those are important languages, but the home language isn't the currency that will get them a job, or we're creating different nuances around languages. And so these children go into school thinking, what's Bangla, what's Somali, and we've done research in different communities, language communities, and all the children have felt that their language isn't important enough in the school to be celebrated. There might be a welcome sign, but actually how else are their languages celebrated? We may do it through food, sharing different culture of food, but actually, again, these are parts of the culture, but a key communication tool, which is our language, is being left out of that child's identity. And they then carry that
for the rest of their lives.
The rest of their lives, but also this part that self-worth, when you think about self-esteem and self-worth and self-efficacy, all of those things actually play a part in those 4 things being celebrated. Because with language comes culture. You then say, well, do I want to wear this? Do I want to wear that? And as we know, our children struggle with what they want to wear, what they want to eat. And so we as parents are struggling because we want them to hold on to those cultural things, but actually the tide is against us. So it's really difficult. So I think the real importance, as you mentioned, is so that they do grow up with the self-esteem, because we all want our children to meet their potential and beyond. And really, part of that is about their self-worth and self-esteem. And as the saying goes, if you don't know where you're from, it's very difficult to navigate where you want to go. Because you haven't got that guiding light or path of who you are. So it's really important for our children.
Okay. That takes us on to your piece of research here. Family. I love the title, Family Jigsaws. I went through this. So you basically looked at the role of the teacher, the role of the mother, and the role of in this case, the grandmother.
Yes.
And how all 3 contribute towards the learning and the development of the child. So what inspired you to get to that point? Like, what inspired you to look at that, those 3 in terms of the child development?
Partly my own journey. So I come from quite a big family, and alhamdulillah, between us we have quite a few children. and I just observed my parents with our children, and particularly my mum's mission to keep the language. So we weren't allowed to speak English at home. We were encouraged to read a lot of Bangla, so the literacy, the numeracy, the oracy. So all of that was very much emphasized at home, particularly by my mum.
And that was taught by your mum as well?
Yeah, so she would teach us, and we didn't go to a Bangla school or Arabic school. It was at home. Not that we liked it. Well, I speak for myself actually. Maybe my siblings did like it, but I don't remember not particularly liking it. But actually, we didn't have an alternative. So that was the other thing. We weren't given alternatives either. We didn't have a TV. We didn't, so that we just had to read. And when you have limited books, which happen to be in Bangla, that's all you're going to try and read. And we used to get literally shiploads of books. Containers of books coming in, and also magazines and newspapers, all in Bangla. So that was kind of the first experience, initial experience of Bangla. But really my real challenge came when I was at school and going through the education system, how the identity was challenged.
Was that primary and secondary?
Primary and secondary. Identity was being challenged, mainly because of the way we dressed. Mainly because of what was being said, that I never quite understood or could accept that there was a them and us kind of going on. For me, that was very strong, that colonial model of education from a very young age. That why is it that the teachers, predominantly white, feel that they can tell us what to learn? And I had immense amount of respect for them. And I had lovely, wonderful teachers, but just the method of teaching, which became more prominent when I was training as a teacher. So I trained as a secondary school teacher, and it was that training again, not the fault of any system, or I think it's just ingrained. And then we came into teaching inner city schools. So I was teaching in an inner city school where majority of the children were from ethnic backgrounds, Asian backgrounds, and it was actually doing a home visit for one of the children, that it became obvious to me how much of their identity these children hide.
Were they Bangla?
In this case, it was a Pakistani family. But when we went home, he was very embarrassed to speak Urdu. Really? He was very embarrassed of his parents. And I remember being slightly embarrassed of my parents going to parents' evening, I
remember that too.
So why is that embarrassment? Why is that shame being created? Although my father was very educated, but I still felt that, does he know English good enough? Was it good enough for the school that I was in? And it really struck me, and that child's sense of shame for who he was. And it was then that I decided, actually, my place wasn't in teaching at a secondary school. I actually wanted to get to the roots of why this is happening, so that my interest in research came. And then I did my master's in education, which really opened my eyes up to different cultural ways of learning. And how children learn in different cultural systems, from Africa to Asia to the Western world, and really seeing the wonder in village learning and what children are capable of doing, and how they are empowered to be learners. Whereas what we see in the Western world is that we are creating bubbles in which our children live, and they don't interact. There's very little interaction.
It's almost like they exist.
They exist in their
side by
bubbles.
side,
So we call these problematic teenagers, but they don't have any space to learn from their elders, because they're tucked away as problem individuals, that age. Whereas Islamically, we know that's the age of wonder and beauty and intellect, and we're supposed to give them so much support to grow their growing brain and energy. And Prophet Islam gave so much input into the youth. So again, as I started to do the first research project I did was on grandparents, and looking at the kind of activities children do with grandparents from different cultural backgrounds. But every time I went into the home, the parents wanted to be involved, but we weren't allowed to. It was just looking at grandparents and grandchildren. as the funding was for that.
So it's almost like...
So it was like, step out the way, you know, do this.
Gosh, yeah.
And at the same time, teachers were not involved either. So it was just the grandparents and the grandchildren, but we were taking these videos and learning into the school to show the teachers, and the teachers were either defensive or in awe of what was happening in the home that they didn't realise, or they didn't ever think to understand, because grandparents weren't really on their radar in terms of the input they have in children's learner identities. So then I embarked on my own PhD, and I wanted to triangulate or square the circle, or whatever that phrase is. And I was really, being a teacher myself, I was really interested in involving the teachers, the parents and the grandparents. And that's where the interest came for my own PhD. And the more I got into it, the more I realised there's more people you can involve. You know, the aunts and the uncles now want to be involved. So there's a whole extended learning that our children are involved in that we don't often appreciate. And just before we started the show, we were talking about, you know, we are the bridges between the two generations, but we also are the gatekeepers.
I was going to ask you, because gatekeeper comes up a lot, and stakeholders in your research. And I wanted to ask you, so in this context, who is who? Who are the gatekeepers and who are the stakeholders?
So maybe just sharing from our own both experiences, we as parents, as mums, we navigate how much access our children have to other members of the family based on our life schedule. Where, you know, I could be working, I could be busy at home, whether I live with an extended family, even within intergenerational families, parents still will have an input by saying, now's not the time to be with grandma or granddad or uncle or aunt, it's time with me, or teach here, I'm teaching you now, you're learning now, your bedtime now. You know, so we carve out particular times that they can spend with certain members of the family. So which I guess makes us gatekeepers. So we also regulate the time that they can spend with them. More interestingly, I found that we also regulate the space. So sometimes I found parents interjecting. So my research was looking at how young children do jigsaw puzzles together with each of these adults, so parents, teachers and grandparents. The teachers, obviously it was at school. The mums, when they were doing the puzzles with with their children, even though the grandmother might have been on site, they didn't interfere. They sat back and they just observed.
Was that in
I looked at 3 families over a long period of time. All 3 grandmothers were the same, more or less. They didn't really feel the need to interfere, or they didn't want to interfere, or they didn't even think to interfere.
Or they felt they couldn't interfere.
Or they couldn't interfere, actually, yes. When it came to the grandmothers and grandchildren doing the puzzles, there are times when the mothers would come in and say, don't do it like this, do it like this, speak in English, speak in English. The researcher wants to hear you speak in English, because they won't understand what you're saying. Because they knew that this was an academic piece of work, they thought that English has to be the language of communication. So it did take me a bit of effort, although as researchers we don't try to interfere in the process, to say to the mothers, this is their activity. And that I didn't do often. I did because I was interested in to see the interaction. So that was generally kind of my observation, that they felt that they needed to guide the parents in how they should teach, particularly teach when it came to learning, how they felt the children learnt, and how they felt that the grandparents should teach. The children didn't often like that interference, and either they would vocalize it or they would just try and do it in their own way. But they didn't like the interjection of the parents in that activity.
That's really interesting.
They would rather be left alone.
That's really interesting. And I was going to mention the whole, because part of your research, you do set the family the task of putting jigsaws together.
Yes.
And you got I think it was 3 or 4 different types of jigsaws.
Yes.
So each one had a different one according to age group. And I think we were talking about this before the show. Well, I found that completely fascinating, because it's got so much meaning, and it's something that can be done silently. It's something that can be done with lots of words, lots of body language. You don't need to speak the same language to do it.
Yes.
How did that idea come to you? But because I just want to know how you got to that, because I just think it's genius.
Yeah. So I trained. That's a different story, I guess. So the jigsaws have always been a big part of my own life.
Yeah.
And we used to do a lot of jigsaw puzzles, but actually, a piece of the jigsaw. So with the parenting courses that I deliver, one of the parts of the course is to have cultural sharing. Parents take part in cultural sharing, and I've always carried a piece of jigsaw, part of my cultural sharing, because I feel that I am a part of the jigsaw of a greater picture, which is my bigger family. And I've experienced and learnt that I play an important part of being part of that bigger family. And we're a jigsaw of a lot of things, right? Piece of a lot of interactions that we have. Wherever we are, we're a part. It's that interdependence that we have as human beings that, and for me, jigsaw represents that quite a lot. So it was just something that was personal to me. And family was important to me. So it was just in a conversation with my supervisors that we came up with the title for my PhD, which makes sense, put the two together, and it's Family Jigsaws. And that's how the title came about.
That Family Jigsaws. And I think it's so relevant to our topic today, which is parenting the whole child. So I remember with my daughter, if we're putting a jigsaw together and there's one piece missing or two pieces missing, suddenly the whole piece becomes insignificant. It loses value, it loses importance, because it's no longer a whole picture. And I don't want to do this anymore because the pieces are missing, or you get disappointed. And I suppose that comes back to the identity of the child, the whole child. So when one piece is missing or one or two pieces are missing, and it's interesting who can put that piece there. So it's not one person who does it all, you need different people to come. And that's what we're going to talk about in this show. Just wanted to go to the next question, and we are going to go for a break at one point, but I just thought we'd just start this. So how does your research fit into this whole understanding of the whole child? So we kind of spoke about it.
I like what you were saying earlier, you know, where so we create this notion of success based on completion of something. And if you look at our generation, we are very much the teachers at home. So the schooling system in this country, and I can only speak for this country, although there are other models like that, we've done a really fantastic job of creating teachers at home without training. All right, so we expect our parents to be teachers with very little input training. So we invest, those of us who are teachers, we invest a year of training. Then we are observed, we do our NQT, and it's getting longer. So when I was doing my PGC, it was 1 year, then it became 2 years, now it's kind of 3 years, I think, altogether. And then we message, there's a consistent messaging from school that parents need to do certain things at home to enable the child to meet their goals.
Which wasn't there before.
Which was, you know, goals. And it's really, there's a lot of pressure at home. And so these parents, when they can't do it themselves, they will get the tutors in, they will get all sorts of support in, resources to make sure that child is learning. What that does is breaks the connection of the parenting role, because it's very difficult to take those hats off at home. If you're a teacher, you go to school and you're teaching, you leave that hat, you roll your sleeves up and you come home through the front door as a parent. But if you're trying to do both at home, it becomes really difficult. And I always say to parents, you know, I appreciate teachers want to do this, for you to do these homework at home, but that's not your goal necessarily at home. Your role at home is to nurture the whole child, make sure that whole child is still in one piece, right? If you take the 4 things we talked about, 4 pieces of the jigsaw, is to see how that 4 pieces are at the end of the day. But not many parents get that chance. So they're either rushing them to go to madrasa, to another space where there's another teacher telling them how to learn, totally different pedagogy, probably not trained either. Doesn't make them bad teachers. You know, I've seen fantastic madrasa teachers. We've done some research in madrasas where mainstream teachers have been in awe of madrasa teachers because the amount of creativity they have and how they manage to keep a child excited and engaged after a long day at school.
Yeah.
So, you know, they are doing a
In the
fantastic in the
evening
evening
Yeah.
when they are possibly tired. But we have fantastic madrasa evening class, whether it's language or Arabic, teachers doing a fantastic job. But the role of the parents just is literally ferrying children from site to site to site. And those who home educate, again, then are the teachers and the mothers and the doctors and everything else on top. So those children are not really getting that that connection. Are you being told to go for a break?
Yeah, we're going to go for a break now. So I'm so fascinated with everything that you're saying. I'm listening to them in my ear. So we're going to go for a break now. The topic today is parenting the whole child. So please do join us again. Assalamu alaikum. Assalamu alaikum, welcome back to our show. So today we're talking about parenting the whole child with our special guest, Dr. MEHERA Ruby, and we have been looking at the research that Dr. Ruby did, Family Jigsaws. So please do join us on the show if you would like to take part with your comments and your experiences. The number will come up on the screen. I don't know by heart at the moment, but it will come up on your screens. We'd love to hear from you. So Dr. Ruby,
Yeah.
just before the break, we were talking about how your research fits into the whole understanding. So we've understood what the whole child is. So how does your research kind of fit into that?
So one of the, I mean, for me, I think I came to the realization of the whole child through the research. So when I was observing the children doing the jigsaw puzzles, putting the jigsaw puzzles together with each of the adults, the parent, the teacher and the grandmother, I observed, you know, when you're doing research, when you're collecting data, it's all data. It's really, then when you have to look through it, it becomes really exciting. And I started to see common themes that was appearing in each of those activities. So one of the things that came through was, for instance, turn taking. Who took what turns? Who started the puzzle? Where was that box when that puzzle started?
And you gave no instructions, right?
No instructions, no. It was just, this is your jigsaw puzzle, this is what you do. And so they worked their way through putting that together. And one of the really interesting thing that I found in the research was the similarity between the parent and the teacher. So so there's particular terms we use in education. So you may have come across the term scaffolding being used quite a lot in education, that we are scaffolding our children's learning. And I've always struggled with that concept because scaffolding is quite firm, it's set, it's there, and it is supposed to tell the child what they need to learn.
There's no maneuvering.
There's no maneuvering kind of thing. So it's instructional based. And we assume or go by the child's response to learning and then give them harder or easier tasks. And that never actually sat well with me. And particularly when I was doing my teacher training, I then came across a term by one of my supervisors. She talked a lot about synergy. So really about the two-way learning. And for me, that always resonated with me because we know how much children teach us. Just observing children will teach us patience, and they are our best trainers as parents. So the idea of synergy really was something that I wanted to look more deeply into. And there was a lot of scaffolding involved with the teachers when it came to putting the puzzle together with the children. Interestingly, it moved a little bit to this idea of synergy with the parents, but it was still very similar. So teachers tended to ask, one thing that came through from my research was that consistently every teacher would ask at least 3 questions in one go to the child.
In one,
just one after the other.
Wow.
So what piece is this? What color? Where are you going to put it? As an example.
Right.
And the child's like, which one do I answer? So often you'll find the children are silent. And often those questions tend to be rhetorical. So it feels as if the teacher knows what needs to be done, but they're just asking the child. So they're always on a higher kind of level than the child. Although the teachers are thinking you're allowing the child, children are not silly. They realize that hierarchy very quickly. Similarly with mums, but there was a bit more synergy. They would allow the child to explore a bit more than the teachers did. What was really fascinating was with the grandmothers, all guards were down. There was no grandparents actually, the grandmothers hardly ever asked any questions. What was interesting was that the children took the role of teachers. And they didn't ask questions, but they prompted, it was more open-ended question they asked their grandmothers. What do you think we should do? What do you think should go next? Where do you think, shall we put this? So there was a lot more open-ended. And the grandmothers were like, and ours a lot more than appeared in any of the other interactions with the teachers and mothers. The reason I mention this is because the grandmothers, they tended to provide a space where there's no expectation, there's no assessment, there wasn't a right and wrong. there wasn't time limitation. There was no rush to complete something.
Yeah.
And they weren't really bothered if something wasn't completed.
Yeah.
So this thing of perfection, success, failure, didn't really exist in those interactions
They were
with the
present.
They were present in that
Yeah.
activity.
Yeah.
And what the children tended to do was thrive in that environment, to explore, to make mistakes, to laugh at themselves. Yeah, so if they made a mistake, they were happy to laugh at themselves. It was fine. And then correct themselves. But also, what the grandmothers did was to draw in opportunities where they shared lots of stories.
Wow.
So
whilst they're doing the puzzle.
While they're doing the puzzles.
Wow.
So rather than saying that piece is missing,
Yeah.
it was more like, what story can we create? Do you remember seeing this bird when you went to Bangladesh as a little child?
Oh.
Do you remember the village where we played? So everything triggered a memory. And what the grandmother was doing was actually sharing stories of 2 generations before her. So her parents and her grandparents. So what you have there is intergenerational transmission, which in this book we talk about prolepsis, so passing on of stories.
I learnt that word from your book.
Yeah. So that was a fascinating concept for me.
Yeah.
That this intergenerational transmission of values and learning through stories. And since my research, I'd loved stories before, but since my research, I've become a strong advocate of storytelling. Just cuddling up and just sharing stories. Get a album out, you know. Just create stories with your children. Even your older children who are parents themselves will come around for a story of their childhood. And that's what I think is kind of starting to be missing from our relationships with our children, because we want factual learning, we want, you know, targets being met, we want, there's so many milestones that they've got to accomplish in order to be successful. And the grandparents weren't interested. Their success was, are you happy?
Yeah.
Are you in this activity?
Yeah.
Are you engaging? And what can we draw from it? Yeah. So, you know, that's how I felt that the children could be their whole self with the grandparent, without feeling that they would be taken apart again to assess each of their, you know, or is your English correct as a language?
Yeah.
Are you sitting properly? Are you, you know, approaching things in an academic manner?
Yeah.
Regardless of whether it's a 3-year-old or a 15-year-old, approach is similar. Are you giving the right answer? So children are very resistant, or they give up. Because you already know the answer, so I have to fit into that box. Whereas with grandmothers, they didn't have to fit into a box. And since this research, obviously I've gone on to do other bits of work, intergenerational work, and it is consistently there that the grandparents have very little expectation. I'm talking about first generation grandparents. When we become grandparents, I'm quite worried of the type of grandparents we will become, because we are the teacher grandparents. So my takeaway, I guess, if there's one to take away from the show, would be that please look at yourselves as parents, second generation parents, where we saw each other as bridges, but actually, are we fulfilling that role? Because from bridges, we're becoming gatekeepers. And that isn't going to serve our children well, because we are keeping a whole set of knowledge and information away. And the system doesn't help. We used to have our parents as childminders before, whereas now we put our children into nurseries and daycare. So you know, the what's against us doesn't help. But whatever opportunity we have, it's really important to make sure, safeguarding permitting, that our children have access to grandparents and elders in our community, that they can share that space. When I say unregulated, I mean our imposition in it. Not that we don't keep our children safe, but how we instruct and create instruction in that space. If we can just step aside a little bit, be okay with leaving your child with their grandparent, and let them be.
I think, you know, the whole concept of gatekeeper is so interesting, because I'm a mother, I've got young children, and you don't see yourself as a gatekeeper that you can perhaps allow and then also stop them from accessing, i.e. the grandmothers, the uncles, the aunts, whatever other people in your life, we can stop that from happening. So essentially you're stopping your child from having an experience and developing that part of their character and their development. And you know, when you did the research, did you expect to see that with the grandparents? Did you expect to see such a difference with how the child interacted, let's say, with the teacher and the grandma?
I was kind of expecting some parts of it, but I didn't expect to see such a stark difference between the parents and the grandparents.
And all 3 case studies?
Within a span of a generation.
Wow.
I didn't expect to see such a stark difference where our generation of parents...
There's only one generation.
There's only one generation. Yeah. With our generation, we're losing language, we're losing culture, we're losing... we may be, parts of our community may be, mashallah, becoming more faithful. That doesn't negate or stop us being proud or embracing where our roots are. And we know our faith embraces that very well. The Prophet, when he went back to Mecca, he kissed the soil of Mecca because that's what he missed. It brings with it his cultural roots, his way. If he had the choice, he said he would have been with the Meccans, but he chose to be in Medina. There's so many different stories. But you know that those roots are very important. And maybe we'll never go back to Bangladesh or our country of origin. I'm saying Bangladesh because that's where my roots are. But it doesn't matter where our roots are, whether it's, you know, at whatever country. And it may be mainly English-speaking country. It still doesn't matter. If you dig deep enough, there was another language possibly there. Due to colonization, due to whatever else happened in that country, it may have got lost. So really taking an interest in our heritage, it's so important for our children. And I say that even if you can't speak Bangla properly, or your mother tongue properly, embrace the history and share that with your children through stories, through the songs wonderful songs, wonderful history that we have. You know, as we know, Bangla, one of the few languages that we fought for that language, but also it's the 7th language spoken in the world. How many of our children know that it is a currency, right, of economics or something so important? But it's really giving up. No, it's the seventh most spoken country in the world. So our children really do need to know that, and the more we can, I'm not saying become militant with it, but to celebrate it and let them know that they are part of a bigger picture, and also celebrate the fusion culture that they're in. They are British, they are here, but also we have things to learn from here as well. And so that will embrace, you know, the grandparents didn't stop the children from speaking English. What was interesting was that they tried to encourage them to speak the Bangla. And by the end of the activity, all 3 were speaking some Bangla, where they didn't try before at all with the mothers. It wasn't forced. It was through play, and we know the importance of play. It was through storytelling, and the grandparents didn't laugh at the children when they made a mistake in their Bangla, in the accent, which we sometimes tend to feel more conscious of. Is my child saying the right thing? Are they doing it with the right accent? Are they speaking the proper Bangla? At the end of the day, you know, your dialect is your dialect. Speaking your dialect, as long as there's a proficiency in a language, your children will cognitively pick up other skills.
I think it's interesting because obviously, in terms of gaps, where the child is not whole, what bits are missing. So language plays a huge part. And I'm like you, I was a 2nd generation. I was brought up here, and I remember going to primary school and getting told off by the teacher not to speak Bangla because it was rude. And then it became something to be ashamed of. And then when my mum and dad used to come to, I used to get embarrassed because they can't speak English.
Because it's rude.
And I didn't tell them. I used to hide, like, you know, parent evenings for them because I was so embarrassed they can't speak. And you were made to feel like that. You were made to feel that it's something to be ashamed of.
And it's interesting you say that, because one of the research projects we did do, we asked the children, so why can't you speak your language in the classroom? and they kept looking around at the four walls as if it was the four walls that said that they couldn't.
Yeah.
Because that particular teacher didn't say they couldn't.
Yeah.
It was never said.
Yeah.
And then, you know, when we took the children to the canteen, the dinner hall, they still weren't comfortable. When we spoke to them in the playground, they were happy to explore some Bangla. So it's actually the setting as well, what's said and unsaid. So there's nothing in the school policy that says you can't speak in your mother tongue in the classroom. Yeah. So it's actually created within the interaction between teachers and children and between the children themselves. So when we say it's rude, what is actually rude? Is it that we don't want them to use inappropriate language? It's never clarified to them. Yeah. So the children think that the language in itself is a problem. Yeah. Whereas when they were able to use the language in the classroom, even the monolingual children were so excited with that. So where children couldn't think of the English word, I refer to this as the cognitive gym kind of thing. You know, when they have 1 or 2, 3 languages, they're raking their brains for the other. So they're saying, you know what I mean. So another child they think knows the same language, and they use their language, and the other child comes back with the English word. Oh. So you see the amazing cognitive skills that these children have of bringing a group together. So it doesn't actually divide children, it actually brings them together. Yeah. And so because majority of us are monolingual, we are fearful of what the other might say. So again, you create the other, isn't it? Yeah. So when you create safe spaces for children, learning spaces for children, they will use it well. They don't think to abuse it. Yeah. That's what we found in our research anyway. They don't. And bilingual learning, there's so much research, and I don't think any particular research, because I had to do the literature review for it, any particular research that ever showed that children misused their home language in a safe setting. Yeah. And they thrived, you know. And
other than language, were there any other gaps that you found when you were seeing the child with the teacher and with the mum and with the grandparent? Was there anything else that you picked up on as well?
Yes. So when you think about the whole child, if you can be your whole child, your guard is down, right? Yeah. You are yourself, and you are more. I refer to it as a child's disposition. So if you think about that child's disposition in that instance, they're relaxed. Yeah. They are open to learning. They are also open to suggestions. Yeah. Whereas if their guard is up and they make a mistake, they might be defensive. They might be overcritical of themselves. I come across so many young people that will not finish a piece of work because they're not satisfied. Like you were saying about the puzzle, they will rather abandon it and not do it because of the fear of failure. Yeah. So when you think about the whole child with elders, you will notice that the children are protective. The other thing that came through is that the children were very protective of their grandparents, and the grandparents are protective of the children. And so there was a mutual protectiveness that was there that really, for me, it was so pronounced that they cared. They weren't just learners there, they were also carers for each other's well-being, how they were they sitting for too long, are they okay, you know. So they were very conscious of their role of in society, that interdependence, whereas it wasn't so evident with the mothers and the teachers, because the children saw them as the other, the authority. And so they couldn't do certain things because it wouldn't be approved of.
It's almost the policing.
It's the policing, the sort of the micromanaging of that space. So with elders, with grandparents, children are more themselves, where they can bring out different sides to them. So we talked about the physical, emotional, mental and spiritual. Yeah. Their spiritual side is there with all the grandmothers, because they were all Muslim grandmothers here. Yeah. They talked about their faith identity, they talked about prayer, they talked about legacy, they talked about what they expected from their grandchildren after they pass away. So they were leaving lessons and values for their grandchildren. Maybe because of who we are and what we're involved with, we don't have the time to do those things.
Or we think we have time.
Or we don't, we have time. Yeah, we have time that we can discuss at a later stage.
Yeah.
But the children are getting it from a very young age, from their grandparents.
When they need it,
And they're also telling the children, in one of the, I think, the case studies, the grandparents are also sharing with the children how they should behave with their parents, how they need to respect them and honor them. So they bring generations together, you know, these core values of the whole self, of respect, dignity, love and honor. You know, they talk about those. Whereas in a jigsaw puzzle, you wouldn't expect that with a teacher and a parent, and it didn't actually happen. So, whereas it did come through with the grandmothers.
Yeah. This takes me on to the next question. So, in knowing situations where you don't have a grandmother for whatever reason, I mean, I didn't grow up with a grandma. And it's interesting because half my siblings did and the other half didn't. Or if they don't have any kind of, maybe grandma's passed away or there's no relationship with the grandma or she's in another country, what happens in those situations, do you think? Do you think something is missing for the child? Can they be whole?
Yeah, I mean, it's difficult to say unless you meet young people that you can go through whole life thinking that you've achieved and done. You won't know something is missing. You'll only know the difference if you have it, right? You don't know something's missing until you've lost it or you're in the presence of it. So it's difficult to say, will there be something missing? However, I will say that we have the opportunity to fill a piece in our children's lives with the elders in our community. So if we don't, and I was looking up to see whether I was really interested in setting up a service possibly of adopting a grandparent, for many families, they don't have grandparents.
That would be amazing.
Here. But I think there is something similar in America. But here we have neighbours, we have community groups, we have friends who may have. It's an elder, a child that would see somebody as an elder, and now we are becoming grandparents, younger and younger. But it's really them being able to see. Your grandmother
yourself?
I am, alhamdulillah. So it's being able to see somebody as an elder. Our children think we're old, right? But we don't consider ourselves to be old. So introducing somebody older than us is an elder to them. And really creating spaces. So, we try to create the project Just Read to create that intergenerational learning space. But really grab opportunities when you can, even if you're at a wedding. Take the time to introduce your children to elders in the extended family, in the community, or neighbours. We've got a video of a child, literally with a grandma, sitting next to her and just stroking her skin and saying to her, "Yours is different to mine," and that brought up a whole story. The grandmother shared the whole story of where those wrinkles came, why and how. And the child was just listening. She was 4, 5. But it was just that connection through just seeing difference in skin. So children don't need fantastic books and resources to create conversation. They're very good at, don't worry about language. Don't worry about the age gap. Don't worry about the mobility. You'll see lots of lovely videos, YouTube videos of children. The other dream I have is of having a Muslim care home, if barring all the taboo around it. We may come to a time where we may have a daycare where nursery children are involved. So they can be with elders, and there's lovely projects like that in the Nordic countries, in the USA. I think there's a couple here now in the UK, and the immense amount of joy the elders get around the mental health. They've noticed the mental health of the elders have improved, but also the joy in the young children, the empathy that they see in the young children, which we actually lack in our young people a lot. Increase in crime rate is an indication of the lack of empathy in our community. So if I've worked with taking teenagers into care homes and spending some time making tea for the elders. These are troublesome young people, or troubled young people, and I always put it in quotes because I don't believe people are by nature troubled. So and it's made such an impact on how they come out of that experience and how they've looked at community differently or their life differently or the sense of responsibility they have. So if we can increase those interactions in our community and chip away at these bubbles we've created, I think there will be a lot more learning and appreciation and empathy, opportunity for development of empathy in ourselves and our children. We don't even see our parents in as elders because people are living longer, more able. Alhamdulillah, there's lots of good, but we do need to take the time, and it has to be intentional. I don't think it's something that will just happen by itself.
Definitely.
And you know, my granddaughter, mashallah, she is in awe of my dad. She hasn't met my mum, but she is in awe of my dad, of why he looks so different. I don't think she can articulate it, but when I point to different things, she wants to know. She looks and she's comparing. She's comparing. So there's curiosity. All our children, there's curiosity in all of us, and we just need to be able to exercise it with respect in the different spaces.
Dr. Ruby, I would love to speak more. I have so many questions I want to ask you, but I'm getting told to finish the show. So thank you so much for coming on the show today.
I can talk forever about this as well.
I can talk about it as well. There's so many things that we wanted to speak about in terms of how grandmothers don't have the significant role now. The cases the recent child abuse cases that came up, and how the grandmothers couldn't play a part, but they knew something was up. And I think it just highlights what you said, that I think by nature grandmothers have something that's given to them, and by faith, you know,
it's
we
experience
have
and intuition.
I know we talk about murabbi, like you know, that whole terminology murabbi. It's something. It's defined as someone who's close to God, and I truly believe that they have something that is so precious that we need to hold on to, and our children need exposure.
No, definitely. The elders are not to be tucked away. They have so much to give. Golden souls, inshallah. So thank you so much for joining us on the show today. Today we're talking about parenting the whole child. We looked at Dr. Ruby's research, Family Jigsaws. So I would really recommend that you go and have a look at this. I've looked at it after so many years, after knowing about it, and it's absolutely fascinating. And I think a lot more work needs to be done in terms of how the issues that have come up from this research. So thank you for joining us today, and hopefully we'll see you on the next show. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.